Hello everyone, my name is David Kowal and I'm here to talk to you today about a decision facing Airbus back in 2004 per the case study where they were deciding whether or not to proceed with the decision to research and develop first and then manufacture the Airbus A3XX and enter the very large aircraft market. Now prior to this decision facing them in 2004, they jointly had decided to move forward with this project with Boeing. And per the case study, Boeing was the forefront of civil aviation for over half a century. They had great financials when you look at their numbers. Boeing just was blowing sales out of the water. They had the number one market share. But a couple things you do notice is that EBITDA is less than 10% of sales, and net income is actually negative in some years. Now, we don't have the actual financials for Airbus, but it's projected by analysts that EBIT, which is earnings before interest and taxes, in 1999 was much lower than Boeing's. Boeing knew that there was not much room for error when you consider the billions of dollars in research and development costs alone. Mistakes and losses can quickly turn a good balance sheet, if Airbus had one, into a bad one. Now, if they had EBITDA of near 25% of sales, then they would be able to potentially absorb a failure if this project, but they did not. So Boeing pulling out should have sent some warning flags to Airbus that maybe they need to relook at their data, because in the case study it mentions that Boeing thought the projected demand numbers that Airbus had spit out were incorrect and not accurate, and if that's the case, then Airbus would be in for a tremendous surprise in the next 10 years. The size of these planes are massive. You can see the pictures on the case study. They can hold nearly 1,000 people. They could potentially have room for casinos, bars, dance clubs. I mean, it's basically a cruise ship that's flying through the air. The research and development and manufacturing costs are so big for a plane like that even a small mistake can be devastating. It can lead to orders being pulled and the complete collapse of the project entirely, which would lead to enormous amounts of sunk costs in research and development. When it comes to the cost that we're talking about this high, you must be absolutely certain of success. It's my belief that there's enough contradicting data from Boeing that the gamble for Airbus is way too large. At the very least, they need to held off, for the next few years and analyze their potential demand numbers much more closely and make sure they're actually accurate, because if they're not, this project is destined to fail. In these types of situations, you must consider worst case scenarios. And in this situation, it really doesn't seem like Airbus is. Otherwise, they would not have proceeded immediately. Now, there's one caveat here, which may be why Airbus is so gung-ho about getting this project going and starting it off the ground. They may know that the government support that they have will prevent them from failing if this project does fail. Now, case study notes that Airbus themselves was founded by companies that were in Germany, France, England, and Spain. These governments had significant interest in Airbus because 37,000 workers were provided by the government, as well as military aircraft and space systems. Also, on top of that, France and Spain governments had direct financial interest in Airbus. I mean, this tells me that Airbus didn't matter. Airbus was not concerned about whether or not this project could fail or any worst case scenarios. They knew that even if the worst happened and the demand was way off and the billions in dollars in research and development were just sunk costs and written off, and they potentially, could that lead to bankruptcy? No, it would not happen, because they knew that these governments would bail them out. Now, it's not my job to look at that potential outside factor. As an analyst, I'm looking at the numbers and deciphering whether or not what risk is acceptable, and in my opinion, the risk here is simply way too big. Now, it's pretty standard for a government-supported company to do this, but I have to ignore the outside influence, and I would tell Airbus not to proceed until they had more, at least for a few years, until they had more data on the potential demand for this project. Thank you all, and good night.